record. We're being recorded. All right. So before I forget, let me go to the Cyber Campus and do the smart attendance for Cyber Campus. And so let me first make sure I always share the screen to share screen on Cyber Campus, and we'll go share. And your smart attendance number is it is 311. 311 is your smart attendance number. So I go to chat and I put in 311 smart attendance number. Okay. So there you go. 311 is your smart attendance number. All right. And so today's our short class. So we want to make sure we have enough time for you to use your paragraphs for the debate. And like I told my European Union policy meeting class that also met today this morning, the university no longer evidently has a license to Zoom. So I had to buy my own license, and I bought the most basic Zoom package, which costs about 15,000 won a month. Not not much money really, but I see that the most basic package lacks some of the features that I was using when we had the Zoom license from last year, right? Like I see on Zoom, you can't push people into breakout. You can't separate people into breakout rooms. People can't be separated into breakout rooms unless I spend more money and buy the bigger and improved version of Zoom. So we're going to have to use the Cyber Campus for that to do our debate today on the topic of. And so let's go to Cyber Campus and go to the vote. And so we have here this debate topic. International Americans should abolish Columbus Day. Hooray! And so since I'm going to have to form two groups, I'm going to have to ask you to vote on the basis of your paragraph. Make sure you can see this. Make sure you vote on the basis of your paragraph if you are pro or con. So would you please do that? If you wrote a paragraph that was pro, please vote pro. If you wrote a paragraph that was con, please vote con. If you could do that now, so that I can know who belongs to which side, so that we can organize our debate here. So I know who is pro and who is con. So 2 people have voted, 5 people have voted. Anybody else should also vote. Please vote. As to whether or not you are pro or con on the topic based upon your paragraph. And you can always, I think you can change your vote if you want to until 12 o'clock. So this is like just a preliminary. And so we have Kim Pyong-koo, Yuk Han Bin, and Lee Chun-ho as pro. And we also have Im Chae-yoon and Cho Chun-sok as con. And so is anybody else going to vote? I guess that's it for now so far. And of course, this is all part of the participation side of the practice. So before we go to our debate, let me see what else I have lined up on my lesson plan. So I'll make sure I don't forget to cover that. So let me go to share screen for the lesson plan. And what else do I want to highlight here? Well, I guess that's about it. I guess since we have our short class, I don't want to spend too much time talking about organizational matters right now. I can always save that for when we meet next Wednesday. And since today is our short class, it's kind of hard to do these exercises and practices that we did on Wednesday. So I will try to organize the in-class exercises on Wednesday. So you saw how I posted the 2 Columbus files for the Columbus trial that we did on Wednesday in class. I will do that again over this weekend. I will post the exercise we'll do in class on Wednesday over the weekend, so you have time to look at that exercise. And I think I will maybe now that I can see how I have to organize things, because I will try to organize you into, if necessary, to groups ahead of time. But we have to be flexible, because I'm not certain who's going to necessarily be in class on Wednesday, right? So I want to be kind of flexible about that. but I will post the, that's what we'll do. We'll do our in-class exercise like the Columbus trial we did on Wednesday. We'll do that on those 2-hour class sessions because I have a little more time. And then on Friday, we'll do our debates so you can, among other things, practice your speaking skills and highlight also maybe some information that's relevant in terms of understanding the significance of what we're covering in the class for what's going on today in the United States and the world, because that's an important point. Like we want to understand how what happened 400 or 500 years ago is really essential for understanding political conflict in the United States, but not only in the United States, but primarily in the United States today. And the founding of the United States as a settler colonialist project by Europeans coming to exploit resources controlled by other people that they want to exploit creates the foundational ideology and structures for creating what became the United States, including prevailing implicit assumptions about, who's the perfect American. The perfect stereotypical American typically is a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Christian, right? So what kind of theoretical framework can we put that in terms to understand what that means? All states have what we can call a core group. So here are the notes that I typically present on the notion of a core ethnic group that dominates the United States, Japan, Russia, China, Brazil, Zimbabwe, South Africa. There is a group of an ethnic group whose culture tends to predominate in the founding of that state. And typically that ethnic group is a majority, but not necessarily always. So, but let's not make it too more complicated. We typically can understand or can learn what is the core group that dominates the nation state of Germany. Anybody want to tell me what ethnic cultural group dominates within Germany? It's so obvious, it's not obvious. Germans! That's why it's called the Federal Republic of Germany, right? So Germany is the state for the Germans. France is the state for the ethnic French. Italy is the nation state for the ethnic Italians, even though these ethnic identities are creations of human beings, right? We just take it for granted. There are Koreans, there are Japanese, there are Russians, there are Chinese. These are all cultural communities. There are many things, but they're also cultural groups. And so if you're an immigrant coming into Germany, how do you assimilate into German culture? You assimilate by becoming German. You learn German language, you learn German laws. If you start a family in Germany, you teach your children to speak German, not the language you brought with them from the country that you emigrated from to get to Germany. And several years ago, Germany accepted over 1 million immigrants from Africa and Middle East and Asia, right? Big issue in European Union integration policymaking class that we talked about this morning. This is before the Ukraine war and brought millions of Ukrainians into Europe, Western Europe. But this is the core ethnic group. So, and like, for example, my experience, what is the core ethnic group in the United States? What's the core group in the United States? The core group in the United States are the people that founded the United States, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Those are the people that founded the American colonies. Founded means dominated, controlled. It means exploited. It means pushed out or fought off the indigenous populations living in the territory when the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, when the English colonists came. And then it does not include also the Africans that came over at the same time. I mean, that video I was showing you, you can watch it on your own, highlighted just how tremendous were the perceived opportunities to make lots of money in the United States, but how difficult it was to get the resources, the labor resources necessary to begin to make this big money with this vast resources available in what was called North America. But it was also dangerous, right? So very soon, from the time that the first English colony was founded in 1608 in Massachusetts, 30 years after the Roanoke colony disappeared in Virginia, that almost at the same time, they brought over enslaved Africans to what became the English colonies in North America in 1619. And this has been a big topic of discussion today, right? This is all part of this hostility towards Howard Zinn and the so-called critical race theory, and teaching about the importance of racism at the very founding of the United States that continues to exist throughout American institutions, going back to the founding of the American English colonies 400, 500 years ago, right? The 1619 Project was the year in which the first enslaved Africans were brought from Africa to the colonies. Just 11 years after the Jamestown colony was founded in Massachusetts. It says here, sometime in 1619, a Portuguese slave ship, the Sao Paulo Bautista, traveled across the Atlantic Ocean with a hull filled with human cargo, captive Africans from Angola. The men, women, and children, most likely from the kingdoms of Ndongo and Congo, endured the horrific journey bound for a life of enslavement in Mexico. Almost half the captives had died by the time the ship was seized by 2 English pirate ships. The remaining Africans were taken to Point Comfort, a point near Jamestown, the capital of the British colony of Virginia, which the Virginia Company of London had established 12 years earlier. So the colonist John Rolfe wrote to Sir Edwin Sandys of the Virginia Company that in August 1619, a Dutch man of war arrived in the colony and brought not anything but 20 and odd Negroes, which the governor and the Cape merchant bought for food, victuals. The Africans were most likely put to work in the tobacco fields that had recently been established in the area. So the point is that slavery was not prevalent or prominent in England at this time, at the beginning of the 17th century. So these enslaved Africans who were bought from other Africans were brought to North America and were engaged in activity that they were not engaging in England. So this is something new for for English people to do. And they have to justify it and they have to enforce it, and it's seen as necessary in order to maximize the possibility of making more money. Like they found these great products in North America, these great agricultural products, tobacco, right? Tobacco was discovered by the Europeans in Virginia, and cotton as well, right? So these were the first valuable commodities produced by agriculture that required labor in various forms, including enslavement, to be brought from Africa. Keep in mind that slavery was still being practiced in Africa. It's still there in Africa. You can find it still in Africa. You can go to YouTube videos and see reports on slavery and enslavement of populations to work in Africa. So somebody got this bright idea that, well, we can bring labor from Africa because we can buy them there. And the point I'm making is that, again, from that point of view of the perspective of psychological balance theory, that people tend to perceive the world around them in a way that allows them to feel good about doing what they want to do. Allows them to feel good about acting in certain ways to maximize their profit, their benefit. Often economic, material, profit, money benefit. And creating institutions, including religious institutions, right, to justify this. So American religion would also evolve and change to reflect this understanding that people had. This is before social science, right? That this understanding people had about the world in terms of the religious beliefs. So American religious beliefs and justifications for for this kind of behavior would also affect American culture, including American spirituality, American religion, and American institutions. And this might sound obvious to you and me, but this is very controversial. Those people that hate Howard Zinn, they will also might well know about the 1619 Project. This was a project that was undertaken by the New York Times newspaper, the most influential newspaper in the United States, the New York Times. And that reporters worked on this project, and this was developed to be used in American schools to explain, for example, why it is, that African-American people are disproportionately poor. Why are African-American people in America today disproportionately in prison? Why are African-American people today protesting? Why they often see themselves as abused by the police? How do you understand the foundation of policing in the United States? We talked about this in previous classes, right? I mean, 2.2 million Americans before the 2020 election, 2.2 million Americans were in prison. That means 2% of the people over 18 and older in the United States, 2% of adults are in prison in the United States. That's incredibly high. How do you explain this? Why is it that 1/3 of the prison population are Black people? Even though they're only, 12% of the population. And so to try to explain this history, including this notion of institutions that were created to justify and enforce slavery. And then, of course, slavery was abolished officially in the 1860s. But still, there were this long history, 200 years, more than 200 years of history, created around this notion that white people are superior to Black people and Indian people, indigenous people. That Black people and indigenous people are resources to be exploited or controlled and exploited, or removed. If they're Indians, kick them out, get out of here. Even if it's going to be very cruel and costly to them. What institutions created that also reflect and affirm and glorify the superiority of white European culture. The whole notion of race, modern notions of race, African, Black race, white race, yellow race, Mongoloid, Caucasoid, Negroid, these were all creations of New World imperialism. Race was not really a genetic notion in terms of people's assumed essential identity before imperialism, European imperialism happened. When European imperialism into North and South America occurred, that's when you begin to create these modern notions of race. That there's a white European race, and the colonized people are an inferior, different racial group of people. So it says here, forced labor was not uncommon. Africans and Europeans have been trading goods and people across the Mediterranean for centuries, but enslavement had not been based on race. The transatlantic slave trade, which began as early as the 15th century, introduced a system of slavery that was commercialized, racialized, and inherited. And it gets institutionalized, including in our fundamental assumptions of what it means to be me and what it means to be you. Enslaved people were seen not as people at all, but as commodities to be bought, sold, and exploited. Though people of African descent, free and enslaved, were present in North America as early as the 1500s, the sale of the 20 and odd African people set the course for what would become slavery in the United States. So it goes on here. In the 15th century, we're running out of time. In the 15th century, the Roman Catholic Church divided the world in half, granting Portugal a monopoly on trade in West Africa and Spain the right to colonize the New World in its quest for land and gold. Pope Nicholas V buoyed Portuguese efforts and issued the Romanus Pontifex of 1455, which affirmed Portugal's exclusive rights to territories it claimed along the West African coast and the trade from those areas. It granted the right to invade, plunder, and reduce their persons to perpetual slavery. Queen Isabella invested in Christopher Columbus's exploration, to increase her wealth and ultimately rejected the enslavement of Native Americans, claiming that they were Spanish subjects. Spain established a Asentio or contract that authorized the direct shipment of captive Africans for trade as human commodities in the Spanish colonies in the Americas. Eventually, other European nation states, the Netherlands, France, Denmark, and England, seeking similar economic and geopolitical power, joining the trade, exchanging goods and people with leaders along the West African coast who ran self-sustaining societies known for their mineral-rich land and wealth in gold and other trade goods. They competed to secure the Asentio and colonize the New World. With these efforts, a new form of slavery came into being. It was endorsed by the European nation states and based on race, and resulted in the largest forced migration in the world. Some 12.5 million men, women, and children of African descent were forced into the transatlantic slave trade. The sale of their bodies and the product of their labor brought the Atlantic world into being, including colonial North America. In the colonies, status began to be defined by race and class, and whether by custom, case law, or statute, freedom was limited to maintain the enterprise of slavery and ensure power. So it says here, sea captains carousing in Suriname, painted by John Greaves. So this is a painting. Let me see if I have that link to that painting. So the transatlantic slave trade emerged and created and was the economic foundation for what became the United States when it finally broke away from Great Britain at the end of the 18th century. So is everybody voted here? I think so. Okay, so let me go back to the notes that I have here and see if I can find those notes. Okay. I guess I don't have it here. Okay, so I guess we can go then to our debate. And yeah, here's the Wikipedia entry for Christopher Columbus. So here you can see Christopher Columbus. Again, he's considered to be a great Italian, and you can find statues of him everywhere, cities, towns named after him. There you see his voyages and you know, a romantic vision of his landing and claiming the territory in the name of Spain. There's been pressure put on the Pope to reject or revoke these papal assertions in the 15th century that gave the Europeans the right to claim these territories as their territories. As part of that Pope's edict in 1455, these territories were declared, in Latin, the term is terra nullius. Terra nullius means territory that's nobody occupies, and that can be claimed as territory to be occupied by. No, I guess I can't. I won't find it here. But so let's go to our debate. And to international students, Americans should abolish Columbus Day. So let me go back to the share screen. And so please, let's go ahead and do our debate. And so pro will go first. Only two people are con that argue against the abolishment of a Columbus Day. And you know, I wrote my comments on your paragraphs also. Not that I disagree with you, but I already highlighted how, you know, Christopher Columbus is considered a great idol, you know, by many people in the United States. So who's going to speak first for pro in our debate? And so let me flip a coin. So heads is the first three people in pro, or first two people. That's Kim Pyong-koo or Yuk Son Bin, and let's see, and it's heads. So Kim Pyong-koo is heads, and it's tails. So Yuk Han Bin, would you please make your first pro statement on behalf of your debate topic that to international students, Americans should abolish Columbus Day. So Yuk Han Bin, would you please give us your statement?
Yes, I agree to the debate topic that Americans should abolish Columbus Day. The main reason is that Columbus himself, did not act like a civilized human being. It has been constantly stated in the book where it praises the word of Columbus, talking about how he took some of the natives by force to get what he wanted, such as gold and other valuables. And he also mentions instances where he ended up using violence to get immediate response from the Arawak Indians who swam out to greet them with keen kindness, and he then took advantage of it. He was a person who would do any act of evil if he could get what he wanted in exchange. This can be seen on the instance where he was preparing a second trip to America, where he lied and exaggerated his discoveries to get the expenses he needed from the Spanish kingdom.
Okay, so that's a very strong statement. So who will speak first for Khan? So heads, it's Im Jae-yoon, and tails, it's Cho Chun-suk. So let me flip a coin, and it is Im Jae-yoon. Im Jae-yoon, will you please make your Khan statement?
So I don't think that Americans should abolish the Columbus Day, because the world always rewards those with powers, and if you don't have the power, you might not enjoy the rights. So from this point of view, Indians were the weak and powerless, and America was powerful. So I don't think Americans should abolish Columbus Day.
So from your perspective, this is the nature of the world. To quote the Athenians in the Melian dialogue by Thucydides, which maybe you talk about in your international relations theory class, right? The strong do what they will, and the weak suffer what they must. And the Indians were weak, and like all weak peoples, they were sacrificed to what we call progress today. To create our modern world. I mean, that's the claim, right? That often, I'm not being cynical, right? That these people were not part of history. I mean, there may have been people living in North America, indigenous populations, hunter-gatherer societies, whatever you want to call them. They may have been there for thousands of years, but they were not integrating the world. They were not globalizing the world. They were not creating new technologies and creating what we call human civilization. Right? They were not part of history. They were living the same way they were living for thousands of years. But the Europeans, for various reasons that many people have been studying for many, many years, began this process of social, economic, and political evolution, what we call being modern, before anyone else. And that gave them a tremendous power advantage. And keep in mind, I mean, we heard Pro's statement, the way the Indians were portrayed as living a peaceful, loving life. They were not. That's romantic. They were no more peaceful than the Europeans were peaceful. The Europeans just had better weapons, but they were violent and brutal the way the Europeans were violent and brutal. It's just that the Europeans were so much more technologically advanced that they overwhelmed these people, and then of course most of the killing of these people didn't happen by Europeans. It happened because diseases were brought from Europe that had not been among those people and wiped out at least 80%. I've seen some estimates that 90% of the population that lived in North and South America died from smallpox. Of course, there were some diseases that went the other way, like, for example, venereal disease, sexually transmitted diseases were discovered in North and South America, and they were transferred to Europe and Asia that way. But the most I mean, so most of the populations were wiped out, not because Europeans murdered them all. They died from diseases that they hadn't been exposed to. The Europeans didn't have to kill them. They died. But do you blame the Europeans for that? Should the Europeans pay reparations for that? For the diseases they unintentionally brought from Asia and Africa? from Europe to North and South America? Okay, and let's go then to the next pro statement. So that was Kim Pyong-ku. No, sorry, that was Yukon Bin. Okay, so heads, it's Kim Pyong-ku or Lee Tung-hwan, and it is tails. So heads, it's Lee Chun-ho, and it is heads. So Lee Chun-ho, Lee Chun-ho, please make your pro statement. Lee Chun-ho. And you can turn,
Yes.
okay, Lee Chun-ho, go ahead.
Well, I agree with that Americans should abolish Columbus Day because Columbus, known as the Great Adventurer, is related to a terrible history. Columbus was a murderer and he killed, it was not directly killed, but he killed about 125,000 Indian captives during his colonization period. And furthermore, violence didn't stop and invaders started to bring Africans to America and made them a slave. So, but I saw the feedback of the professor and I agree that it is hard to abolish holiday, which is very important. So maybe it's good to just change into some other celebration day, which would be better. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was only in January that Joe Biden declared Martin Luther King Jr. Day a federal holiday. So federal workers do not have to work on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which I think is January 22nd officially. So for I don't ever remember the government ever taking away a holiday, even though Columbus Day is an official. I think it's a federal holiday. Not all the states of the 50 states give the state workers that work for the state of Ohio, the state of California, the state of New York, the state of Texas, give them days off for the federal holiday. It was a big source of pressure to push. Some states did not want to give, for example, Martin Luther King Day a day off. They were charged with being racist and the like. So it's hard for me to imagine that any politician who gets elected is going to ever agree that we should replace Columbus Day with another day and call it Indigenous people. You do see that at the local level. Remember, there are tens of thousands of local elected governments. If you include school boards, state, county elected governments, there's 3,000 counties. They all have their own local government bodies, city governments, not to mention the 50 state governments. So there's thousands of these entities, and they can pass resolutions and declare that today is Indigenous Peoples Day. You know, they can do that, and they do that. Whether or not they give a day off to their workers, they pay them for a day off on vacation, that's another issue, right? But there have been city governments that have declared Columbus Day to be Indigenous Peoples Day, and so on. I don't know the details if they have announced in those cities. I think San Francisco might be one that they've given those San Francisco city workers a day off on Indigenous Peoples Day. I don't know, but it's hard for me to imagine if they're going to agree to ever abolish Columbus Day. But I mean, it's okay. Well, let's go on. It's a complicated topic. So let's go to Khan, and that leaves Cho Chun-sok for Khan. Cho Chun-sok, your Khan statement, please.
Okay. I don't think Americans should abolish Columbus Day because, well, Americans, including whites and natives, should remember this day in American history. So I'm not going to defend Columbus from right-wing nationalist point of view, because of course, as Howard Zinn mentioned on this textbook, Americans' beginning and foundations consists of conquest and slavery and death, and Columbus' genocide of natives is not worth commemorating. So precisely for this reason, I think it's better to change the meaning of the day rather than just abolish it.
Yeah, again, what's the benefit of having this discussion? Somebody who's sympathetic, obviously, to the indigenous American Indian movement, for example, we're not going to abolish Columbus Day, but we need to talk about why it is that, for example, in Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, that the life expectancy is about the same as it is for people living in Somalia. Why do they have these tremendous social problems of drug abuse, alcohol abuse, obesity, diabetes, and make them more vulnerable to the COVID-19 pandemic? We are only talking about these questions because we want to try to solve problems today. We want to try to make the world a better place today. We want to improve the quality of life of people today. And if you're a neoliberal or you're a realist, you might say, you know, we're wasting all of these resources among peoples in America that are not white because we're not letting them get the best education they should be getting. We're not treating them and giving them equality, social and justice rights. So they're not, of course, they're not getting the education that they should be getting. And if we educated them better, they would make more of a contribution to the economic and military and political influence of the United States in the world today, because we'd have a better trained workforce, like South Korea, right? South Korea is influential in the world in part because it's one of the most highly educated populations in the world, right? We're not getting the most human benefit from our American human resources, because we're ignoring these problems that come from centuries of marginalization, particularly among what we call people of color. People of color, Hispanic people of color include Black people. They include, basically that. I mean, I don't know if you really want to include Asian Americans as people of color, because Asian Americans are more like Jewish Americans. They tend to be high achievers. They tend to be disproportionately prosperous, which brings us back to the notes that I just began to talk about, and I didn't go with it forward anywhere. This notion of core group, before we continue with the debate, to give you some kind of theoretical framework for understanding what we're talking about here. Core group is the group that dominates the state. And make sure that you can see this. So I go to share screen, and here, I think this is it. Okay, yeah. So there's core groups in different countries, right? The core group in Brazil is Portuguese, even though half the population is not white. And again, these notions of race in the United States, you're considered Black, even if you have only one ancestor is Black. If you look Black, you're considered to be African American. You can be very light skinned, but if it's clear that you have Black heritage, you're considered Black. And that's stigmatized, right? But the core group is the group into which you want to assimilate. And so, as I mentioned, 120 years ago, Italians and Greeks, Southern Europeans, Jewish people were not considered white. Today, in 2022, they are considered white. So these are all subjective notions. Even though they're assumed to be genetic, they are still subjectively defined through political and sociological processes that reflect the social psychology of what it means to be an American or a Korean or a Japanese or a German, but we're focusing on the United States here, right? So the core group in Mexico is Mestizo, core group in Argentina is Italian, and the core group in Israel is the Ashkenazi European white Jews. They are the core dominant group into which people assimilate. And then you have, so this is the core group. And the core group tends to, through political sociological processes, collective processes at work, they tend to set the criteria for what it means to be, to act as a good American, or a good German, or a good Frenchman, or a good Korean, or a good Japanese, right? This is the core group. Typically, it's the majority. But there are minorities within the state. And these people who are considered to be backward because they're poor. These include populations that typically came to the United States by force. Africans did not choose to come to America, right? Italians, Greeks, Jews, Poles, Germans, French, they chose to come to America. So these people tended to be viewed as backward, lazy, again, because these people want to exploit them. right? So you have to see them in a way in which you're doing them a favor by civilizing them, upbringing them. That we're parents civilizing these backward childlike peoples. That we're doing them a benefit by bringing them to America and bringing civilization to them. But these groups, however, these tend to be groups that are more advanced in the sociological processes of mobilization and group identity. And we call these so-called advanced groups. In Europe, they tend to be Jewish populations. And of course, America was founded by European people. So, you know, the stereotypes of Jews, these people we subject to stereotypes. These people we stereotyped as lazy, backward, the childlike stereotype. In fact, you even call these people old white men boy. Hey, boy, boy. Even though you're talking to an 80-year-old black man. Hey, boy. Or you can call him worse, right? But boy. These groups are stereotyped, the anti-Semitic stereotype. This is the stereotype that Europeans tend to have of Jews, Middle East people tend to have of Armenians, Indonesians and Malaysians and Filipinos have towards the Chinese minority in Southeast Asia, right? The anti-Semitic stereotype. That these people, that they're pushy and aggressive, that they'll sell their mothers to make money. This is stereotypes. Again, I'm not talking reality. And in terms of politics, the claim is that they're under suspicion for not being loyal to Indonesia or Malaysia or the Philippines. They're loyal to themselves. These people will tend to view these people with envy. Envy is the feeling that I have, and like I talk about in class, right? You can't explain politics unless you understand the role of emotion, and that means identity and stereotypes of self and other. That they'll be targeted with feelings of envy. That they have something that these people want, but these people don't get it the right way. They don't act, they don't look, they don't behave in the correct way. These people decide what is the correct way to behave in America or Germany or France or Korea or Japan or China. And these people have more of what these people want, but they're seen as having it, gaining it in illegitimate, inappropriate means. That they're loyal to themselves, that they help each other, that they're not loyal to the greater population. And during wartime, this could lead to genocide. Particularly if these people are viewed as exploiting these people, right? That white nationalists talk about the Zionist occupational government, that the Jewish Americans control and manipulate Black Americans to oppress these white Americans. They tend to see conspiracy theories, these nationalists. Nationalism associates with stereotyping and conspiracy theorizing. So, but that's all we can really talk about that today. We'll come back to that later. Let's go back to our debate. And let's see who's going to speak next. So Kim Pyong-koo is ahead, and it is tails. So Yi Tong-wan is ahead, and it's heads. Yi Tong-wan for pro. Could you make your pro statement, Yi Tong-wan? Yi Tong-wan. Oh, somebody, he's not available. He says he's on a train, so he can't talk to me. He can't talk. Okay, so let's go then to who else will speak. And it is Kim Pyong-koo. Kim Pyong-koo.
Yeah. I'm on the opposition. As a student living in Korea, the Joseon dynasty also had the same experience of losing its country by Japan. And a lot of people suffered historical disgrace for a very long time under the Japanese imperialism. And that period lasted for quite a long time and causing damage that innocent people cannot even imagine. I think the pain of losing of their home for a long period is somewhat can be similar to the situation of the American natives. And speaking about Chae-yoon opinion, if we pinpointed to the situation in which the problem occurred, we have to see the wrongdoing and having difficulty protecting their changes in a cooperative manner. And Columbus first approached for gold in the first place, and they changed their mind and they killed a lot of native. And I understand about Chae-yoon opinion, but their acting cannot be seen as a good. That's my opinion.
Okay, and there's only two people on con, so I think maybe we should just go ahead and hear the other pro statements. So Kim Pyong-koo and Yu Han-bin have spoken. Lee Tong-wan is not available. Lee Chun-ho, I think, did you already speak? Let's go with Yang Chi-yoon. Yang Chi-yoon, are you ready, Yang Chi-yoon?
Yep. So I've actually decided to change my opinion.
Oh, you're con now, huh?
So I don't think Americans should abolish Columbus Day because most other countries also go through the same process of genocide when getting their land, and it may cause some guilt among Americans. However, it is the Indians' fault. I would say that they did not protect themselves and prepared invasion prior to the day genocide was caused.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, again, to continue on with this, the focus on social movements, which is the focus of this class, right? That if you're going to solve problems, like we talked about the crime rates among marginalized peoples in the United States, or the death rates, the health rates, the COVID-19 morbidity rates, people have to organize. People are not going to give you your rights. You have to organize and demand them. And that means you have to respect yourself. And you generate your respect by showing your effectiveness in organizing and expressing yourself. That's the whole purpose of having these kinds of discussions, not because we're really going to change Columbus Day. I don't think anybody's ever going to abolish Columbus Day, but by the mere fact of talking about these factors, about organizing around these factors, about using these issues to mobilize Indian voters, for example, to vote in elections, even though it's not necessarily easy for them to vote, right? That this is in itself a prerequisite for long-term efforts to integrate socially and economically these people into American society beyond the official superficial notions that, yeah, everybody has the right to vote. Yeah, you're equal. I don't want to hear any more of your problems. You have the right to vote. So, that's it. We're done. All of these discussions are themselves serve the purpose of addressing these problems. So, and then making demands. So like Indian Americans over the last 60 years have been mobilizing, for example, in many places, using their treaty rights that they originally gained when they signed treaties with the United States government, originally before the United States government just eliminated them. The US government came into contact with them and signed treaties with these Indian people. Eventually, the American government would then just, yeah, I don't know. Who cares what treaty I sign? You're so weak that we're not going to enforce the treaty. We're going to take your land anyway. But then after World War II, these Indians have been finding Indian activists have been finding these treaties and said, hey, we have the right to self-government according to this treaty that you signed. We didn't rip it up. It's still in force. And American courts have been willing to accept that argument. So, for example, American Indians reservations have been using their tribal rights that were originally signed by these treaties, signed in the 19th century at different times to, for example, establish casinos, gambling casinos on the reservations in a state like, for example, Nevada, or not Nevada, let's say Texas or West Virginia, claiming they have the right as sovereign nations recognized by the U.S. government. According to these treaties, see, that you signed in 1876 and in 1881, see, we're sovereign and we can establish gambling casinos to raise money, to make money for our tribes. But that requires, political effort and mobilization. And that means being self-aware and being angry to be able to make this effort to try to organize, engage in social activism to change the conditions of people. So this again is our short class. And I think everybody, Kim Pyong-ku spoke, Yi Yun Han-bin spoke, Yi Tung-hwan can't speak, Yi Chun-ho, did you speak?
Yes, I did.
Okay, well, I think then on the last remaining questions on, so please respond to the following statement. Being woke is cool. Being woke means being aware of all these issues and being aware of systemic racism and systemic white supremacy in American society. Are you woke? Or you don't have to say if you're woke, but do you think being woke is cool? Being pro Howard Zinn, being pro 1619 Project, it's being woke. That's being cool. So you can vote on that one. And then on the next one also, Americans are more racist than Koreans. Do you think Americans are more racist than Koreans, given America's history? And so you can vote on that one as well. And Koreans seem to have a very strong racial component, but that's true everywhere, right? So Americans are more racist than Koreans. And also the last one is, please respond to the following statement. The United States will always be a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant culture country. It's always going to dominate, if only because English is always going to be the language for success in America. You might speak Spanish at home. You might speak Korean with your mother, but if you want to be successful in the United States, you have to speak English and probably be a Christian. So you can respond to those 4 questions, those 3 questions as well, and you have until 12 o'clock to do that, and I'll give you participation points. But that's it for today. Anybody have any questions? If not,
I have a question. Do we have class on Monday?
Yeah, like this. Like I told you, I have to meet 45 hours. I also was supposed to go to a conference in November, and I'm going to be gone for a week. And I'll try to meet with you online. I think I can meet with you online because I have a good internet connection. I'll be staying at the conference hotel, so it'll have high-speed internet. But I gotta, and if we meet the 45 hours, we just will meet, and we won't have to meet during the week 15. Okay, so that you have more time for your own final end of semester issues. So yeah, we're going to meet on Monday. I'll send you the link. Okay, Zoom link. Everything on Zoom on Monday.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.